Thank you for joining us today. I think I want to call my panel the Mythbusters. So we'll be doing some experiments later. The past, present, and the future. So, I think we're trying to figure out how do we best connect with our clients? How do we meet their needs? How do we make sure that it's like for like properties? And from a CHIPA video, how do we prevent being inadvertently lumped in with other people? I think most importantly, we want to control our own fate. I loved the idea earlier of net rev par, because I think that really feeds into what we're doing here. What's the cost of doing business? And going from there. So good afternoon. Thanks to Service Apartment News for having us here today. It's exciting for me to be here because when I first came to CHIPA in 1999, I said, hi, I'm Kimberly. I'm different because I was a real estate broker. I said, I deal in property. And they said, well, why would you want to deal in property? So it was great fun talking to some of these guys. And Eric used the quote the other day, if cash is king, then property is queen. And I think we've determined that over the course of the day, it's about controlling the property. And then the next thing is about connecting that with our clients. I work for a company called Avenue West Global Franchise. We come up with locally owned real estate brokerages, and we teach them how to do corporate housing. Some people will call me a disruptor, and some people call me an innovator. In 2005, I just knew I couldn't help everybody, so created the idea of corporate housing by owner as a platform to connect people with property I didn't want to deal with clients, so I could get them off the phone faster. It's gone from there. So today I sort of divide my crew into George Westwell. You've met with Cheval Properties. I consider him my user of OTAs and distribution platforms. He'll be, as long as he's not distributing stuff, we're okay. He could be a user.
I'll be a user.
Eric Bache, who is my connector. So he's the software guy, if you want to know about APIs. And I think we're going to have to get into some definitions here because we keep saying GDSs and OTAs and APIs. We may all just glaze over, especially after beer earlier. And then Aaron Turner, we heard earlier about BridgeStreet and their mathematics experts. Aaron is sort of new to the industry, but comes from that technology side. So he's the doer when we talk about creating these platforms. And I know with BridgeStreet, their new platform, which is a couple years old, when I said, well, Aaron, why'd you leave eBay? He's like, well, I like high growth industries. So we're glad to have you in the industry and welcome, and we'll have a lot of fun with that as we go forward. George, I'll start with you. Can you just talk a little bit about GDSs and your opinion of GDSs and where you think they're going to go?
To the graveyard. Simply, no. To me, I think GDS is a tool that we use it. I think there's a requirement for people well, I think there was a requirement for people who had large volume or corporate, things to get on the GDSs. But I think the whole process of doing RFPs to get onto a GDS is the most time-wasting, inefficient thing that's ever, really happened. And I really, to me, it's RIP for RFPs. I really think they're gone. I mean, it takes on average 3.5 months to do an RFP. And then 8 months later, they come back and they ask you the same 717 questions, which you want to fill. And one of the questions, which I just have to quote this because I thought it was quite amusing, but one of the questions they ask you is if you've got a defibrillator. So most people say yes, but the second question is, has it been tested in the last year? They don't ask you that. Third question is, have you got people on site 24/7 that know how to use it? And the fourth question is, does anybody know where it is? Which I think it is. So to me, I think the GDS is an antiquated distribution platform, had its day, and people are hanging on to it because it's a way. And I see this dying very quickly and moving on. So do you think I like it?
I think that's a perfect opinion, and we love that. I think what's important about the defibrillator, we were watching that video earlier with people say, I use Airbnb from a privacy standpoint, and Aaron and I were talking about that earlier. well, what about the security and the safety part of it? You don't ask the Airbnb provider, do you have a defibrillator, right? You don't even ask them if they change their locks.
No, but what happens is, I mean, this has been talked about a bit earlier, but in the UK, we have an accreditation. So at the moment now, if you go on Airbnb, you take your gamble. You pick a place, you pick a location, you pick a price, and you take that risk of what it's going to be like. But now we have an accreditation program in the UK that will do over 350 sort of checks. They'll check you've got a health and safety policy, and this is even for an individual property. So what you can do is you can give assurance to the consumer that the property they're going to buy has got all the basics. They've got fire cover if they need that and whatever. So, these things are around, and we need to be using them more.
Okay. So I'll skip to the next question, which is, so do you put your accredited properties on Airbnb?
We've done it with one of our properties, and we just wanted, like I think somebody said this morning, just feel what and test what the thing's like. But I think going forward, it is a platform. It's got global reach. It is a lower commission rate. Why not? Mm-hmm. But as long as you've got the accreditation with it. Yeah. So I think but the reality is that at the moment now, the business we get through OTAs is just over 10%. So it's not the huge part of our market.
Yeah, and I think part of it is, I think we've been struggling all day. How do we define ourselves, right? I've always said that it's the extended stay lodging segment, and the most important thing is the consumer needs to make a lodging choice. And I don't believe we've given, you brought this up earlier, we haven't given enough tools to the consumer to make a lodging choice. When you stay in extended stay your property, you're 4 to 7 days. Typical CHIPA properties this year came through at 76 days. They have been 84 to 88 days. At Avenue West, we manage private residences. Those stays are generally 100 days. And if you go to corporate housing by owner, last year 12% were there for a year or longer. And I think we have to sort of figure out how do we best define that so when we end up on these distribution platforms, we can figure that out. So.
Yeah, I agree. From a product standpoint, I think we need to look at what the consumer wants. And I think it was a great point about the GDS. If you look at it from a consumer standpoint, there's no rich imagery. It's very clunky to use. And when you look at the business models that have died in the past 5 years, like Blockbuster. Netflix was created because the CEO had a $40 late fee. And Netflix was created, and a year later, Blockbuster, the largest video, movie chain, went out of business, right? If you look at the proliferation of Amazon and eBay, they're taking the market by storm, but it's all generated from what the consumers want. And I think people living like a local, they want to see those local experiences. They want technology. They want to be able to book now, and they want that rich content. And the GDS isn't that place. Airbnb is serving some purpose because they are showing that consumer experience, but we need to get that kind of experience throughout all of the different channels that you were talking about.
And when we talk about what does the customer really need and how are we connecting with them, explain a little bit more how BridgeStreet develops their outside sales team. You're not just creating a technology, you have a sales team behind that.
Oh, absolutely. We really focus in on all of the constituents within our platform and our marketplace. We talk to the users first and foremost, and then build the processes and technology to support that. So we match up our 5,000 corporate clients and corporate travel managers with over 140,000 accredited, vetted suppliers from a supply standpoint. And what we do is we ask, these 5,000 clients, what is your corporate guidelines? What is your corporate travel policy? And we configure that within, our booking platforms and give them a window or even an API for our more sophisticated clients that gives them a window into curated inventory that maps their travel policy. The reason, a lot of corporations don't use OTAs is because, they get served up all of these choices and some of them may not meet their travel policy. And with our platform, we're serving up curated inventory that's guaranteed that it will meet their corporate travel policy.
And I think it's really important. We talk a lot about Airbnb. And in disclosure, Aaron was relocated and he chose the lump sum relocation and did it all on his own. But according to the CHIPA webinar the other day, only 11% of business travel policies actually allow their employees to stay in Airbnb properties. And yes, they're predicting that to go to 17%, but as an employer, there is some liability. If you put your employees in an Airbnb property and something goes wrong, there's a bigger problem. So I think we have to sort of think about what does the consumer need from that perspective. Now, you just mentioned API, and Eric, for better or for worse, I think of you as the API man. You have spent many years trying to get CHIPA members on software that even allows them to API feed. What does that look like?
Yeah, it's all about connecting systems with each other. Airbnb, Booking.com, all these systems, generate bookings, that fill gaps. What this industry has done and has done historically is, partnered up with each other, that corporate housing providers book into each other's inventory. Really excited when BridgeStreet came on the scene a year ago, and now that they've got some traction, they got some transactions under the belt this year that they're growing, that's actually an OTA platform that can actually get the bookings that the corporates want, which are the multiple month bookings, the 3-month bookings, 2-month bookings, which is the core of our business. Where does that demand come from? In my opinion, it's either coming from your own sales force or it's coming from other providers. I mean, that's the network. So it's all about connecting us as a network. And I've heard some of the other sessions today, talking about that, we're here as an industry to partner together and that we do well. And some of our businesses are asset-based, some of them are client-based, and it's really connecting all of that together. So, connecting the industry has been a passion of mine for many years, and I've been working with OTAs and how they don't fit our business model, educating our industry and how the OTAs work to try to get the connection and try to get everything lined up. And it's still work in progress by any means, but it's being able to connect with each other, demand. If you've got a client that wants inventory that you don't have as your core inventory, you need to be able to flex. And how do you flex? Well, you can go out to another corporate housing provider that may have it in another location that serves your client, and that way you still retain your client and you're able to book. So again, it's that connectivity, that partnership working together that I see is really what's needed in the industry, and that's what I'm passionate about.
And I think sometimes we get too much in our own heads and taking the time, understand what the clients want. So George, when you're dealing with your clients and you have quite a few inventory, quite a bit of units to choose from, what do you do when your client needs something that you don't have?
Get it for them.
And how do you find that?
Well, basically, most of the things that they want. At the far end of the scale, people might want just private chefs or bits and pieces, and most things that you want in London within a short space of time, you can get. But may I just, while I was on the subject of OTAs, can I just give a plug for OTAs and see if I can shoot them down?
Oh, sure.
Okay. So I find this quite interesting. CBRE London in 2000 took 30 hotels in the London marketplace, and they looked at what their GOP was. And at the time, on average, across that group of things, it was 40%. 2015, they took the same hotels and they did the same analysis, and the GOP had dropped to 28%, so a variance of 12%. And when they started to analyze what had happened, these hotels were paying 6% more in commission to the likes of the OTAs, but at the same time, they'd spent 6% more trying to fight the OTAs, advertising, digital marketing, increasing their sales force and things. So you actually look at that that sort of change in dynamics has reduced GOP. But one of my colleagues went to a conference recently, and they were listening to a European hotel group where they actually have decided to get rid of their sales force. Better be careful what I say here, because my sales marketing director's in the room sitting on that table there. But they actually decided to get rid of the sales force and just concentrate on OTAs, which actually that direct side became a lower cost to them in terms of distribution and getting to market. But the other thing I want to just say, if I can, on shoot down, and I'll be interested in Aaron's point of view is this, is that OTAs, and everybody loves them, have been there for such a long time, and we've had the hotels fighting against them. But what I'm almost seeing now is the likes of the Amazons or Alphabet through Google, and to some extent Airbnb, starting to push them from the top. So I'm kind of wondering where the OTA is going to go in another 5 or 10 years' time. Are they actually going to be absorbed or taken in to these much bigger players who have got so much data in terms of they know exactly where we move, when we get on a bus, and all that thing. So I'm just thinking, where are we going to be in 5 years' time with OTAs?
Yeah, no, we share your opinion on the expense of the OTAs. I think that's why BridgeStreet has invested so much in a direct sales force, because you can't get to the buyers, the corporate travel buyers, through direct digital marketing all of the time. And our commission structure is much lower than your traditional OTAs. So we've taken we've taken an approach where that physical salesperson is key, and we've deployed them in key markets across the globe. Just on the point that you were mentioning, where are they going? I think we're already seeing it. I think if you look at the earnings, the earnings reports for the Expedias of the world and the Priceline groups, who are both changing their names every so often, I think they're getting a lot of downward pressure. I think the big hotel chains are pushing back on their commission structures, and I think that they're getting very similar supply. You see all the same supply on all of their sites, and you're getting a lot of pressure. And so I think with the institution of scraping sites and the institution of supply being much more readily available, I think it's hurting the OTAs. Certainly the OTAs have a lot of demand and they have a lot of eyeballs on them, but I think they're going to have to reimagine their business structures. And I think the way they're doing it is similar to some of our strategy, which is to offer more tools and support and technology for clients or consumers, as well as suppliers, to make their business better, to make it easier for them. So how can we provide tools that show the number of impressions, the rates, where you're missing out on click-through rates? How can we make a supplier's business better by giving them analytics, which we've invested in, much more than hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars in our analytics package, so that we can give that data to our suppliers to make their business better. And I think the OTAs are going to have to expand those offerings to convince supply for the extra expense. I think they're going to get more pressure on their margins. And then likewise, from our standpoint, from the client standpoint, making it easier for them to book, making it easier to access that inventory, whether it's through technology or still picking up the phone and requesting it.
And I'm getting two key elements out of that. Understanding the data, know what's coming and going, understanding your pricing, and that's part of the topic of title of this session is pricing, but it all comes down to just core data. But my favorite part about it is we're coming back to that human element, right? So we have these distribution portals. People want to push buttons, but they want speed. But we still have to have that human-to-human connectivity, and I think that's exciting. Now, Eric, as you're talking to some of these different end distributors, what are you predicting as part of the future of the Expedias and the Pricelines of the world? Are they going to evolve, or are they dinosaurs?
Well, I mean, they're such big companies, and they do deliver, as we've heard today, for filling gaps. There are limited uses for them, but there are definitely uses that you get it. There's going to be some high seasons in some areas that you're going to be able to pull a lot higher average daily rate from an OTA. Let's just say San Diego in the summertime, San Francisco in the summertime, than you would off a traditional corporate booking. So there may be some opportunities there. But the core business is to do long-term bookings in the service apartment industry. So it's either through your own sales force, or I think the best source is the industry itself for those bookings. Other corporate providers that have the inventory and have the client demand for you. I mean, they've got more of a booking source and a booking type that fits your business model than, let's say, Booking.com, who can't even take a stay greater than 30 days. There's a limitation there. BridgeStreet is coming into the market and allowing longer minimum lengths of stay, longer lengths of stay on their platform. So that's what I see. It's really the industry itself being able to open a network. Just like the hotels want to drive more direct bookings. We can do it as an industry ourselves, having a network to book into each other. But that data's got to all be in a place that's real time. It needs to be done in 4 minutes, not 4 days, which is a traditional model that's been there. So it's about having your properties on a technology that can distribute via an API.
Now, George, from an operational standpoint, do you look at other companies' availability in real time, and do you let anybody else look at your availability in real time?
We do use a survey monitoring where we subscribe to it, and basically we establish a competitor set. So what we can do is we can see how the movement of prices is occurring within that. So yes, we do monitor it, but it's through like a subscription service. And no, we don't let people look at our systems.
So you physically pay a fee to look at everyone else's when you
In a competitor set. So each property will have a competitor set, and we know what their price is on the OTAs, and if they drop it £20 or move it £20, we'll get an alert. So within that area, we can make some sensible decisions. But can I just go back to challenge the comment we talked about with salespeople before? Because now I got to say, I know nothing about this. I was only reading about it, but these things I think we touched on the phone. Is it blockchains? So I mean, what I was reading was quite interesting. They were talking about smart contracts, and we were talking about salespeople. And what they were really saying was the data will be in this blockchain. So if I make an inquiry now directly with the property, it will see what day of the week I'm booking, how many people are booking, what is the dynamic pricing. So all the data that we now have in different areas that we connect by APIs or we deliver through a salesperson is, I'm told, going to be there in the future through these blockchains. So I just push it. I want 2 rooms, 4 nights in this place, and all of this comes together, and in 4 seconds gives me that price and gives me the opportunity to book. So I don't know if it's going to be here, but there's a vision that it will be.
And I think that's one of the things as an industry we have to evolve to, in the idea that in some cases we were making large profit margins based on an inefficient system. So one of the reasons why Avenue West doesn't publish our rates on our website is because the first thing you ask the client is, what's your budget? Because you could get a client moving from New York to Denver and their budget is 3 times what you would normally charge for that apartment. And so I think one of the things we're going to have to figure out is not just how do we connect with the global client, but based on transparency, how do we preserve that profit margin? And then we were talking a minute ago about, so all we're talking about here is technology and getting everyone into the system and moving people through the system. Facebook is obviously talking about cybersecurity today, and I know, Aaron, that's one of your passions. What are what should we be thinking about and knowing about as we try and force our clients in and out, or our properties in and out of some of these distribution channels?
Yeah, I think it starts with trust. I think that guests rely on us to take care of their data, to take care of their stay, and so I think that's why all of us are professional operators, which differentiates us from Airbnb. And part of that trust is both a physical trust as well as a data security trust. And I think from a data security standpoint, there's a lot of people in the supply chain. There's a lot of people that touch personal identifiable information. And so making sure that agreements with your supply chain protect that data, have certain protections in it, and making sure that the people you're doing work with certify that they're protecting that data, so there's some assurances there. That's key. We've been on a mission for the past 2 years for GDPR, which is rolling out the end of May, or May 25th. And people are just starting to, within our supply chain, are just now starting to wake up that, oh, this is real, and there are significant penalties, and there's significant processes, procedures, and technology that has to change. And you can't get it done in 8 weeks right now, right? So they're missing the boat on that. And so just having the conversation with everyone that touches the data and everyone that touches the guest. A lot of people just focus on, the cybersecurity standpoint, and sure, you can put in, BridgeStreet, we have 24/7 security monitoring. So we're sniffing all network traffic with the third party, making sure that, no anomalies are happening in the data. We're PCI compliant, SOC 2 Type 2. We're doing all the things
let's slow down on that 24-hour monitoring. So does that mean you're monitoring everybody from Nigeria who's accessing your site, or what does that look like, and how do I as the customer feel comfortable?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely. So our data center, we have physical hardware devices within our data center that's monitoring network traffic, making sure that it fits the normal patterns of safe data transfers between known entities. So if we don't recognize someone coming into our environment, we stop them from coming into our environment. When we pass data to our supply chain, we're making sure we're doing it in a very safe and secure way over secure protocols. We're making sure when they do get that data and it goes into their systems, they have rules and procedures for how they handle that data. And there's a big physical aspect to it as well, because at the end of the day, a guest is checking in to a front desk associate potentially, or talking to someone on the phone that has access to their information. And so as simple as someone calling up and saying, "Hi, I'm Aaron Turner, can you check me in?" and them saying, "Sure, I'll check you in," and not asking any qualifying questions, well, they could be giving secure information over to someone that hasn't been validated. So connecting all of the people, the processes, the tools in a safe and secure way, it's been a big focus, and I think it's going to continue to be visible within the industry with Facebook, with Hyatt, with, it's hard in the hospitality industry because there are so many touch points and data goes throughout our entire supply chain.
So as a property person, I'm controlling my property and I'm trusting these OTAs and this distribution. Is there a cute little list that I can go down check-wise that say, okay, these are the top 10 questions I should ask any distribution portal?
There are multiple lists, and I think that's part of the problem. I mean, GDPR, there's 80 pages of checkpoints that you have to
Sounds like your
check off on. And then SOC 2 Type 2, there's a whole process around that. There's 5 stages to that process. PCI, there's a 80-page questionnaire that you have to check the boxes on. So it depends on what rules and regulations you choose to subscribe to, or that you're forced to subscribe to. But certainly all of them are important, and all of them have a specific focus, and I think all of them are pertinent to our industry.
So what I'm foreseeing is that service department news, if we just pressure them a little bit, is that we would like to have a column on cybersecurity. And so if you can come up with different checklists and point us in different directions, and if you can keep your pulse on cybersecurity, I think that would be helpful. Okay, there you go.
Can I just add something to that? Because I agree with you, but I think you've got to keep a balance this. And actually, one of the biggest causes of breaches is not the cybersecurity, but is the employee. So the employees, so you mustn't lose sight of that. And there's a big case in the UK now where an employee who was authorised to get some information, he was aggrieved, he got disciplined and published it all. And so every cybersecurity that you could think of allegedly was in place, and the employee just takes it and publishes it. So you've just got to keep a balance between that and the people that were using it.
And I think that's part of pounding the pavement, and what Eric was also saying with, connecting each other. When I call someone up and say, hey, do you have a unit that I can rent from you? Do I even ask you, do you bond and insure your employees? Those should be some of those questions that we're asking too. Aaron, did you get a security background check when you were hired by BridgeStreet? Odds are pretty good that they did some background checks, but I think we take for granted that human nature.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that checks and balances, kicking the tires is really important.
Absolutely.
So
And just for the record, I did have a background check joining BridgeStreet.
I would expect nothing less from Sean. So Eric, as you're talking to anybody, have you seen any warning signs? I know at CHBO in the old days, we literally talked to every property owner who put a property on CHBO. We blocked all IP addresses from Nigeria. It just wasn't worth any potential business that might come from Nigeria. They just hacked too many things. Do you see any security breaches with the API feeds?
I haven't seen any breaches with it. I do know that both Booking.com, Airbnb have annual protocols to go through in regards to the security of the system. They're getting more and more in depth. But I just recently moved to Streamline, which their technology and their development staff is incredible. And they go through all of that to make sure everything is secure. My previous company, I was doing the check boxes myself, and some of the terminology and language was just way above my pay grade. And yes, they are 80 pages, and the self-assessments that they do, the PCI compliance, the PC22, I mean, it just goes on and on and on. So it's just being on the systems. It's buyer beware. You need to be cautious, and as business owners, you want to make sure that the systems that you are on, are compliant with this. And it's a trust issue, just like it always has been.
So we're talking about getting inventory from point A to point B. I think the other part is, how do we price that point B, right? And how do we maximize what's best for the client, apples for apples. I mentioned a minute ago, New Yorkers coming to Denver and they're paying too much for their corporate housing. How do we have that blockchain accountability and pricing, and what does that look like I know, Aaron, you talk about a lot of reporting. So anybody who's on your platform, I push a button at any time. Explain to me how I become a more sophisticated pricer.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one thing we don't do is we don't want to compete with our supply chain. That's one of the biggest differences. You know, when you look at the difference between Amazon and eBay, Amazon will take all that data and then go into start building products and then, you know, compete with its supply chain. eBay made it a point that they would never compete with their merchants. And so we're taking that very same approach. So we're collecting all of this data, and instead of competing with them, we're giving this data back in the forms of real-time reports and real-time analytics to give suppliers feedback on, you know, this is how many impressions you're getting, this is your click-through rate, you know, these are the prices that we're showing when, you know, your property was shown and it didn't get a click-through, and some insights into why we think that the property wasn't clicked through or why that conversion didn't happen. And we're providing that information to suppliers to let them run their own business and to let them manage pricing how they see fit. But it's providing them the insight that they don't, you know, we distribute on Booking.com and other OTAs as well, and we don't get some of that insight, right? And so we're being fully transparent with all of the data so that we make it easy for our supply chain to make better, quicker decisions. And it's all through analytics and reporting and insights.
Now you mentioned distributing to Booking.com. How do you work with that 30-day stay minimum? Or are distributing things less than 30 days?
In some markets, we are distributing things less than 30 days. In other OTAs, you are allowed to set parameters for minimum length of stay. I like Eric. We're working with the OTAs to add certain parameters to their APIs, like minimum length of stay, which is in all of our APIs actually, because it's a difference between our space and the general OTA space. But today we're pulling the levers that we can, given the tool sets that the OTAs give us.
I know, Eric, you spend a lot of time on the phone with the Airbnb guys. What's their future for 30-day stays?
Airbnb has actually, over the last couple of years, have gotten multiple month bookings. So we see 2 and 3 month bookings coming out of Airbnb, which is probably the best that I've seen right now. Looking forward to seeing BridgeStreet come into the space. For the last 4 or 5 years, I have been searching for OTAs to have bookings 30 days or greater. And there's been a lot of startups that have come and gone in that time frame. It's just been really hard to find an OTA that would fit the corporate housing business model of the longer term stays. It's just usually been other providers that are able to do it, or your own website. Booking.com maxes out at 30 days, so you can't even have a 31-day stay booking on their site. It's a great industry out there, and I'm just, hope that we can all connect together or find OTAs that, can provide the bookings that we need.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is just with payments, right? Sean mentioned earlier about our relationship with WorldPay as a payment processor for us. Two of the reasons that we chose them was, one is because of the security aspect. It's a more secure environment. But the second reason is their flexibility in payment. Airbnb did roll out the multiple month bookings, but if you look at their payment model, it doesn't work for most long-term stays. They're either asking it all up front, which who wants to put $10,000 on their credit card all at once, versus monthly reoccurring payments that we would all accept from the corporate housing industry. So I think that the OTAs have a lot to learn, not just all of the ramifications of a longer-term stay that we all know as being in the business from a payments security standpoint. I think they have a ways to go.
Absolutely.
And just out of curiosity, your payment program, do you just charge the people on a monthly basis, or how does that work with BridgeStreet?
There's rules in place that basically yes, but if there's certain rules that if it's 32 days instead of 30 days, then we may charge the 32 days. If it's 60 days, then it's monthly. We have all those rules.
And do you charge by the night, by the day, and do you prorate on a 30-day month?
I'll let our finance director talk about all the 20 pages of business rules that he set out with the finance team, but we have all that worked out.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the challenge within the industry is there's so many different variables with that. Now, George, obviously you're subscribing to a service to know what everyone else is pricing things, and you were talking a minute ago about people trying to get rid of OTAs, but really their profit margins were going up. Do you see your profit margins going down? Do you feel like the sophistication in pricing by connecting with these subscriptions, since we don't have that novelty here, does that make you more profitable, less profitable? Would you blow them up? Would you enhance them?
Well, it certainly gives you an advantage, but the problem is, it's not an automated situation, so it's a moment in time. You're getting it, and therefore you need people all the time looking at it, and it's that sort of process that now needs to be integrated. So as soon as that movement occurs, you can look at your yield management system, and that can start to make the adjustments for you. So I think it's certainly good to know what's happening. It gives you an advantage, but it needs all to come together and be automated. And that's where it goes back to these blockchains. From what I've seen, that's exactly what it's talking about doing. Because it's also measuring demand as well. If prices are going up, you assume the demand's going up, and you can start to factor all of that in to really make sure your dynamic pricing is at the best.
Now, we did talk about this earlier, but if you're looking at your 5-year plan, are you hiring more mathematicians, or are you hiring more outside salespeople?
Douglas? I think it's going to be mathematicians from now, obviously. No, I think what we're doing is we're working with partners that, they're the experts. I mean, this is not our call. We've got the product. We've got to make sure that our distribution, our connectivity, that we're working with partners that have advanced that technology and that do it for us and that make it easy for us. The quicker the route to market, the quicker the response and the dynamic pricing, the quicker it's been. So we stay clear of anything that's not our core business, but find partners that we believe can deliver that for us over time.
And one of the things Aaron and I were talking about earlier is Airbnb is called a unicorn. So any startup company that becomes $1 billion in valuation or higher is considered a unicorn. And I always like to remind people that it's a mythical creature. It doesn't actually exist. So the ability to build something and then get adoption from our clients is a whole nother story too. We've had a number of companies get VC backing. They spent millions of dollars creating these beautiful platforms, and yet the customers don't want them either. So I think, looking at both sides of it, I think there's still that human element. You're going to have your outside sales job for a while. Just figuring out how to complement that. So yeah. At least you won't be unemployed today. And I think with CHBO, being 12 years old, I tried to put as much educational information into CHBO as possible, and I don't own it anymore, so I'm completely neutral at this point. But what I have learned to appreciate more and more is that pounding the pavement with real humans counts for job security, whether these OTAs exist or not. Because 12 years into it, a startup gets $14 million, and I'm like, I'll see how long they last. And I'm not as afraid of them as I once was because of that reputation. And I think that's one of the things, as long as we're controlling the product, the property, and we're controlling customer service and customer experience, and we're making real-time relationships, I think we're doing pretty well. So does anyone have any questions on cybersecurity, on OTAs, on tips of the trade? Do we have a cube that Pierre's going to throw at you?
Hard.
Anybody? Sure. Doug, sorry. No? That's on.
Just in the context of GDS, completely appreciate that this is going to be very clunky and all the other parts. Why is it taking so long for
I think you've got to ask that I think you've got to ask that question to the GDS people. But you know what I think it is? I think we're scared of change. People have got a job, and I don't want people not to have a job, but I just think people are reluctant to make the change. 60% or in excess of 60% of the travel buyers that are using the RFP and process, they say it's wrong, but nobody's doing anything about it. So it's like I talked on the previous session about, things are not changing. I think if we're going to make an influence in our industry and we're going to change it, we need to drive that change. And what's happening is that other people are overtaking the GDSs, and it will disappear, not because they've thought about it and they've changed it. It'll disappear because other people have outrun them. But I wish there was quicker results.
Yeah, hang on. Catchbox has died.
Just a quick question. We saw in the figures earlier today that the peak occupancy time or the peak rate time is Wednesday, Thursday. And I'm hearing a lot of people say that their pricing or their model is a 30-day minimum stay. So within those 30-day minimum stays, do you have variable rates during that week?
Yeah, we have it by day. So basically, we would have dynamic pricing by day. And if you wanted to stay a multiple of one day, say 30 days, it would aggregate those prices and say that's your total. So it still gives you the opportunity of using dynamic pricing and maximizing on those days.
Our analytics package does the same thing. We tackle it the same way. You have to break it down into the smallest component, which is days or nights, and then you aggregate them and then either discount or based off length of stay, adjust your pricing accordingly.
But on that, the other point is I'm going back to OTAs. I'm sure Aaron will slap my hand for this. But there was one OTA that we were on the other day where they've calculated the price. So let's just say it comes out £1,550. But they put another price on top saying it's been discounted from it. And we have no idea. So they're trying to drive the consumer to believe they got a discount. And there's got to be a law against that. If not, we need to create one.
That is the American way of doing business. I mean,
I raise it 2 times and I give it to you for half price.
Yeah, absolutely.
JCPenney's is going out of business and Kohl's is doing fantastic. And that's exactly what the American consumer is actually used to.
Yep.
So we do that quite a bit over here.
Okay.
All right. If there's no more... Oh, there is one. Here we go. I think this is working now.
So you said you aggregate the prices over 30 days. Do you then discount it, or are you charging that aggregate price over that period?
Probably for a single booking, we would charge the aggregate price because you're out there on the distribution system, so people are going to see it, push the button, make it happen. I guess the converse is if, and this goes back to that other dynamic, if we know what a length of stay is, we know how many people are coming, then there's always that opportunity to discount. But then you've also got to bear in mind, you've got to have rate parity. So I couldn't give you a price on an OTA and then offer you a discount there as well. So we've just got to use that pricing to maximize the occupancy.
Rate parity, hey.
Did I say rate parity?
Yeah.
Or price parity? I forgot what I said, rate parity.
Yeah.
There is a way to manage it on the OTAs with multiple rate levels. So you can have one rate at a 3-day minimum length of stay at $200 a night, 7-day length of stay, minimum length of stay at $150 a night, and a 30-day minimum length of stay at $100 a night. And they just have multiple rate IDs that go into the system is one way to manage it on that. But if you're here in New York City, it's $2,500 a night. For 30 days, so it's $75,000 if you're if you're at AK properties and no discounts necessary.
Okay. Thanks, guys. That was really good. That was really good. Really good.
Thank you.